Welcome into Perfect Game Retirement. You know, retirement is a unique journey for each of us. And the thought of that one-size-fits-all solution, it is a myth, but what if we told you there are some certain universal truths that can guide every retiree? Today, that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to juxtapose the individuality of retirement plans with the foundational principles that remain consistent across the board. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Perfect Game Retirement Podcast with former professional baseball player and now financial coach at Black Oak Asset Management, Ryan Ledman. This show will help you make the right financial decisions so you can pitch a perfect game in retirement. Here's the windup and the delivery.
Ryan, welcome in. How are you today?
Hey, doing well. September, well, at least the recording of the show, and it's football season. Braves just won the NL East for the sixth time in a row. Things are going pretty good.
When the Braves are rolling like this, are you still kind of locked in on them more than football, or are you able to kind of balance both? Is there a priority for you, I guess?
Usually it's a no-brainer. It's usually football as soon as it takes over. But, I mean, this is – and I hope they still win it. They should. They deserve to win this whole thing. They are the best team in baseball, but obviously they still have to play this out. But I think as good as this team is, baseball is hanging right there with football, which says a lot because it's usually – baseball takes a distant second to football once it starts. But, man, this team is unbelievable to watch, and so many teachable moments. Like my daughter sits there and watches with me, and I sit there and go through, and because they just play the game right. Their approach to the game, how they do it, how they play, their reactions, like they have fun. They do some things that may quote unquote show the other team up, but it's just they're having a good time. They're not doing it derogatory toward other people, but you also see the adversity and how these guys handle it. I mean, Matt Olson, you don't know if he just struck out or hit a grand slam. Same thing with Austin Riley. So these guys just are so. Again, they do it right, and I like to watch them play and their approach. They're not doing this, hey, let's hit a home run. If not, we can strike out 3 times and it's okay. They put the ball in play. So I'm hoping that approach kind of comes back full circle. And I was watching the Phillies game last night, and I digress, and we'll get to the show topic, but playing the Phillies, and Schwarber, who's their leadoff hitter, has like 40-something home runs, 98 RBIs, and is hitting 196.
That's crazy, right?
That is the most unbelievable stat line I've ever seen, and not a good way. Like, I could care less if that guy has 42 home runs or whatever it was and 98 RBIs. Like, put the ball in play. What would your numbers be if you just put the ball in play? Anyway, so I'm hoping that mindset gets back.
Well, you mentioned stat lines, I think, too, and I'll let us get into the show as well. But one other thought, Acuna's season, I mean, this could be one of the great all-time batting offensive seasons of all time. And although, like, I mean, sure, like if you're in the world, you're around Atlanta, you're hearing plenty about it. But I just don't know nationally this getting as much of attention as it should. With, who's going to close in on 40 home runs, finishing with 70 RBIs. But you just look across the board, 200 hits, 140 runs. I mean, just every single aspect of the game, not to mention he's hitting 335, which is incredible. I mean, it's just all around one of the most remarkable seasons I can remember.
It is, and I mean, it does show what a major market media. I mean, no disrespect to the 2 Dodger guys that are competing for the MVP, but it should not be close. And John Smoltz was saying it the other night on the broadcast, like this should not be a discussion. Period. Those guys are having great seasons. Matt Olson should be thrown in there for MVP, but you look at what Acuna has done. Again, cutting down on strikeouts, putting the ball in play with 2 strikes. That's why he's hitting 330-something. And again, obviously these new rules with, pickoffs and all that, obviously he's taking full advantage of it and swiping bags like crazy. And then hitting home runs just by the right approach because he's got so much power. So, yeah, it is a historic season. So for it to be a discussion that it should be somebody else, I think joke is a strong word, but it should not be a discussion whatsoever. He should win hands down.
Yeah, and happy for Matt Olson who got out of Oakland and now is able to thrive. Still have a really good season. He's been a good player, but now to kind of get that attention and be around other guys that can really kind of elevate himself. So
he and I went to the same high school. So
really?
Go
That's cool.
Parkview.
That's awesome. Yeah, very cool.
Parkview. I'm nowhere mentioned in the top echelon of pro players, but obviously Olsen and Franco are kind of are the top two that came from there. That's
really cool. All right, well, let's jump into it then, Ryan. As we mentioned, we're going to talk about some universal retirement truths, and I'll point everybody to Ryan's website, blackoakam.com. A lot of tools, resources there. You can schedule a Retirement Coach 360 session online, plus check out the videos that Ryan's producing as well. So a lot of great content, and again, the goal is to help you learn and to continue educating you in the world of financial planning. So let's get to some of these truths, Ryan, because as we mentioned, yes, everybody needs a customized plan. There are a lot of things that are going to change person to person. These are truths, but even when you talk about each one of these truths as we go through today, you need to focus on these, but each one, the way you approach each one of these is probably going to be different for each person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's customization to all of these, but yeah, there's some pillars that you just can't argue with. Kind of like, as controversial as Dave Ramsey can be. I mean, saying, "Oh, we're Dave-ish," or "We do this and that," but some of the pillars that he talks about, as far as getting out of debt and having a budget, you can't argue those things. And if you do, then you're not going to be successful at some of these things. So, yeah, a lot of customization to this stuff, and obviously there's many more aspects to these universal truths that we're going to go over. But I kind of picked the top five that I see the most, which I think arguably are the most important. So, yeah, definitely some customization to these, but hard to argue where they need to be.
Well, the first one then is income planning. Everyone needs an income plan, right? You can't head into retirement without knowing exactly where your income's coming from and how you're going to distribute that.
Yes, and this seems like a no-brainer, but it's amazing how many people don't do it or think about it. Just like you need a budget, you need an income plan. Basically, an income plan is a budget when you get in retirement. So knowing where these income streams come from, even if it's a $200 a month pension that you got vested in, but they did away with back in the 80s or 90s or something. So you need to account for everything. You need to account for Social Security benefits that you're going to get. And again, we've talked about this on the show before, but I get some people arguing that, it's not going to be there. Well, the people that we're doing income plans for, these are people that are knocking on the door of retirement. They're going to get it. It's not going to go away, at least this quick for people who are within 2 to 3 years of retirement, maybe even less than that. So you got to have an income plan, but keeping it simple, showing this income plan on a one page, where's everything coming from? What are my assets? What are, am I getting rental income? Am I getting Social Security? Am I getting a pension? So where are these sources? Do I have an annuity? Where are these sources coming from? And laying it out on one page where you can see it and go, okay, that makes sense. You don't need, 50-something pages of some financial plan that you can't make heads or tails of. So make it simple, make the complex very simple. And that's when people are successful, when there's some complexity to your life, but you also need to know before you do an income plan, how much am I spending? How much am I going to need? And that's a moving target. It is. It's difficult to know that sometimes, but doing your budget before you retire and know what expenses you're going to be getting rid of and which ones you're going to keep, but then which ones are you going to add in? Because there's going to be things that you add in when you get to retirement as well. And again, those things are a constant adjustment. And when we meet with our retirees, we constantly adjust the income plan. The first draft is never the one that lasts. It's just like writing an essay in school. You write a first draft and it gets edited, it gets changed, it gets moved around, and add to, take away. There's so many things that are going to happen, but you got to have an income plan just to have an idea. And you need to know this probably a few years before you retire, just so you know, hey, do I need to save more, or do I need to kick the can down the road another year, or can we live on less? So those things there's solutions to those, but it's just which one are you going to do?
All right, so income planning is a priority. It's the first truth we want to talk about. Long-term care is number 2 on our list. Everyone has to have a plan to address it. That could be a number of different things, right? A number of different ways and strategies in order to approach long-term care. But bottom line is you need a plan.
You do, and there's no guarantee you're going to need it, because there's circumstances that happen that you may pass before something like this happens, but maybe your spouse does. And it's funny, anytime, and we mentioned this on the show on previous episodes, but almost unequivocally, when people say long-term care, they tack on the word insurance every single time. And just because we address long-term care does not mean a long-term care insurance policy. That is only one of ways to pay for it. You can self-fund it and save up and have enough assets to cover it. I think if you can have something in place that is not 100, that you rely 100% on self-funding, because that can really deplete your asset bucket, because you don't know how long you're going to be in there for. I know what the averages say, I know what the stats say, but those numbers keep increasing because of the shell of our bodies stay alive longer, but the mental capacity is not there. And so that creates long-term care stays, whether that's in-home, at a facility. So what are you doing in place? Again, self-funding, maybe doing a long-term care insurance policy that covers a portion of it. Don't feel like you got to cover the whole thing. It's almost impossible to cover the whole thing with a long-term care insurance policy just because of the cost. It's expensive. You may not qualify. Going through underwriting for a long-term care insurance policy is very difficult. Sometimes they won't give you a policy, and sometimes it's easier to get a life insurance policy than it is a long-term care insurance policy, which is kind of weird because death is going to happen. It's just whether or not you die within that term of life insurance policy, or if you have a whole life. But, there are hybrid policies out there now that are a life insurance policy that you are paying on, that you can spend your death benefit while you're alive on long-term care. So it's kind of a dual benefit. So you've seen the industry change. It was just long-term care insurance. And then as it got more and more expensive, then these hybrid policies started to come about where, hey, if I don't use the long-term care, then I at least have a life insurance policy, which is true. Obviously that comes with a cost as well, but going through and knowing what those costs are could be more productive than just a long-term care policy. There's annuities out there that help with the income stream. They may, be double the income stream or 1.5 times the income stream. If you do have an annuity, and whatever your annual payments are on that annuity, it may double, or it may go up 1.5 times that amount while you need care for up to a certain amount of years. So there's some ways to offset it. It's got to be addressed. It's got to be talked about. It's got to be discussed. Because again, as an advisor, you're liable for stuff like that if it's never addressed and talked about, and then, your clients need it and their assets basically go down to nothing and their beneficiaries are left with nothing, then that's a potential lawsuit case. I've seen it before. I've seen it happen before because it was never mentioned. So it's got to be addressed. It's got to be talked about. Whether or not the clients do something, again, that's kind of up to them, but at least it needs to be discussed, and total cost and, possibility of having to use assets for long-term care. Yeah, it's got to be discussed, and it's got to be a part of the plan.
All right, again, as we go through these universal truths and we hit on something maybe that you haven't prepared for as much as maybe you feel like you should, you can always reach out to Ryan at Black Oak Asset Management's online at blackoakam.com or 470-508-0508. All right, I think one thing we've all kind of realized even more the last couple of years, this one won't come as a surprise either, but we got to keep up with inflation, right? So it is important for us to have a certain amount of money set aside in cash in the bank, emergency funds and whatnot. But we have to keep in mind that the truth is that money sitting in cash is not keeping up with inflation.
Yeah, and obviously this is getting better. Inflation is still relatively high. It's kind of settled, if you will. I guess the most recent data the other day said it's kind of upticked a little bit, and it's amazing because of fuel prices have kind of gone up a little bit. If you've seen paying more at the pump recently, but yeah, cash reserves, short-term cash is paying a little bit of yield now, but there's still so many, and it's mostly the large banks still have savings accounts that are paying. And I even looked this up on a website. I won't mention their name, but a big major bank was paying 0.01% on their savings accounts. And that's like highway robbery. Why in the world you would sign up for something like that? I do not know. But so, yes, CDs are paying actually a decent yield. Are they keeping up with inflation? Not quite. So I guess if you look at your net return, you're still losing money, but you're just not losing as much. I shouldn't say losing money. You're losing purchasing power. But it's doing a better job of keeping up with inflation. So CDs are paying pretty well, 3-month treasuries, even money market mutual funds are paying a pretty good chunk right now. You can go to websites and look up what are high yield savings accounts paying now. Sometimes checking accounts anywhere from 4 to 4.5%. So if you have cash sitting on the sidelines, look at your bank statements, look at what your monthly interest you're earning, and do the math on it. Some people, I've looked at their statements and they just didn't know what they didn't know. And you see a certain dollar amount on there, you're like, well, you could be earning 3, 4, 5 times that amount based off of what you're earning at your credit union or your bank. So some are paying, but be intentional about that, because that's just money sitting on the sidelines that you could be growing, trying to keep up with inflation and trying to keep up with your purchasing power.
All right, got a couple more truths we want to run through here, and we shift from growing our money to having to pay out some on taxes. So always we have to remember, we can't stress this enough, Ryan, that those tax implications of whatever you're invested in are going to matter long term.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, again, we've talked so much about taxes on here, and it's an unknown. I mean, there's going to be taxes. That's a known, but an unknown. How much are we going to get taxed? How are we allocated? What kind of retirement accounts do we have? How long have we held those retirement accounts for? Because some are qualified, some are non-qualified. And what I mean by that is qualified is your kind of tax-sheltered accounts, if you will, your IRAs and things of that nature. And then your non-qualified or your brokerage accounts, they still can be used as a retirement account, but they're accessible, anytime you really need them. And they're taxed differently. Municipal bonds, they're taxed differently. So what kind of makeup do you have? Because a lot of your taxation, if you can say keep more in your pocket from taxes, that's almost like a rate of return that you're getting without it being a rate of return. You're keeping more in your nest egg because you're not paying as much to the federal government. Now, again, it's not tax evasion. It's maybe tax avoidance, if you will, because of how you're allocated, because you've done Roth contributions or conversions, or certain investments are taxed at capital gains rates or long-term capital gains rates, and those vary depending on what your income tax brackets are. Again, your Social Security is taxed differently because of your taxable income. Your Medicare premiums are different because of your taxable income. So tax implications are a huge, huge part about it. And going through a tax, you need to go through a tax scenario so you just know, okay, you may say, well, I need $120,000 a year in retirement. Okay, you need $120,000, but how are you set up? Does that mean we got to take out $140,000 to be at $120,000 net? So you have to account for that. You have to account for $140,000, not $120,000 if you have a lot of pre-tax accounts. So yeah, tax implications are huge, and they can make a giant difference. And the sooner you plan ahead on that, the easier it is.
All right, one last one we want to share with you. Again, these aren't all the truths, but these are ones we've kind of identified as maybe ones that should be priorities for you. But the last one deals with estate planning, and I think a lot of people brush it off because they want to think that's way off in the distance, but also because they just feel, hey, I don't have that much to my name. I'm not wealthy. I'm not rich. I don't need estate planning. But it's not just for the wealthy, is it?
100%. Yeah, it's not just for the wealthy, because I think when people hear the word estate, they think estate tax, and estate taxes only apply to individuals that have more than $12,920,000. And for a married couple, that's over $25 million that you can give away without estate tax. So in that scenario, yes, most of you listening to this don't have anything to worry about as far as estate tax issues. But estate planning is maybe as simple as titling your accounts correctly. Like, do you have an individual account that should be titled as a joint account? So if something happens to one of a husband, wife, or spouse, that money moves over immediately into that other person's name. And if it's only in one person's name, even if there's a beneficiary, it may be held up. Probate may be an issue, but if you have life insurance policies, qualified accounts like IRAs and Roth, making sure your beneficiary forms are correct. That's estate planning, okay? Obviously getting a will, and if you want to have trusts and things of that nature, those are going to have some additional costs, but trusts avoid probate too. It's not public domain, it's all private. So assets get distributed much, 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 much quicker. So some people are like, I don't want to pay an attorney and set up trust. That's going to be a few $1,000s. Well, it's going to save the people that you leave behind way much more time, headache, and money if those things are set up. So having trusts, whether it's revocable or irrevocable, I mean, you can control a lot of this stuff. That's what they nickname it, controlling it from the grave. You can lay out how you want your beneficiaries to receive this money over the course of their life. So there's a lot of things that go into estate planning. And again, it could be as easy as making sure beneficiary forms and titlings of accounts are correct. That's technically estate planning.
All right, very good. So some things to think about: income, long-term care, inflation, taxes, estate planning, some really pillars when it comes to retirement planning. But if you have questions for Ryan, want to follow up, want to sit down, go through your plan, you can always log on, blackoakam.com, or call him, 470-508-0508. Got a mailbag question I want to throw your way today, Ryan. Get your thoughts on this. From Carlos. He says, I've talked to a few different advisors about how they get paid, and it sounds like they all have completely different models. One guy even made it sound like he doesn't charge fees at all, so I'm not sure how that business model could work. Anyway, are there this many different fee structures, or does everyone just explain it differently?
Wow, that's pretty funny. No, well, we don't charge you anything. They have to make a living too, which is okay. Just be honest on how you get paid. So I would imagine that person's probably getting a commission from either the mutual fund company or a annuity or the insurance company. So it may not be directly out of the client's pocket, but more or less it's still paying for that advisor. So I'd run the other way if some advisor told you that they don't charge any fees at all. Yeah, there's several different ways. There's fee-only models. There's fee-based models. Fee-only means fee-only. Like you can only charge a flat fee for a plan and to give advice, but you cannot receive any commissions of that regard. Now, again, commissions aren't a terrible thing, so that's where you're a fee-based. We're a fee-based advisory firm, so we charge usually an assets under management fee. Sometimes we charge a fee for plans. But then we also do ancillary things. We do help people with life insurance. We do help people with Medicare, sometimes annuities. So those things pay a commission. They do. They pay from the insurance company directly, but we are compensated for that. So we're technically not a fee only because every advisor here is licensed, insurance licensed as well. So we do receive some commissions, but it ain't a lot. Most of it is all fee-based. From the assets that we do manage. So asking those questions. There's so many different ways to get paid. Some people are subscription based. Lots of different ways. So just ask.
All right, great question, Carlos. Thanks for that. Let's close it out then with a little getting to know you question for you, Ryan. I know you have a pretty busy schedule, not only at work, but the kids are always doing something, and you're traveling quite a bit. So I don't know how far you have to go back to answer this question, but what was the last TV show you binged?
I don't think I've ever binge watched a TV show. I just don't. I don't have the time. Nor I'm. How am I wired? Just ask my wife. I'm constantly wanting to do something. It's hard for me to sit still for a long period of time because I'm always feeling like I could be doing something more productive. So I just kind of looked and was like, okay, what's the most recent things I've watched? And a lot of times before I go to bed, just to turn my brain off, I will watch a little bit of a show. I tried the Swamp Kings.
Okay.
And I just hate Florida. So sorry, listeners, if you like. I can't stand Florida. Just like in that episode, one of the defensive backs for Florida says he, dropped a cuss word, but says I can't blank and stand University of Georgia. So, hey, it's mutual. The hate is mutual, but it just didn't go anywhere. I mean, there were so many topics that they could have talked about and dug because there was so much controversy when Urban Meyer was there at Florida with, Aaron Hernandez. And I mean, God, there's just so many different things they could have uncovered, and they didn't. So I'm like, okay, this is boring. I got over that. So, and I think this show aired many years ago, but Suits, I don't know if you've watched
I'm aware
that.
of it. My wife likes that one a lot, yeah.
It's great. I mean, it's about attorneys, and it's just constantly, it's awesome. I can turn my brain off for about 15, 20 minutes before I go to bed. Watch that. It's clever. And it's attorneys in a very high-level office, and they only have Harvard law graduates that work there. So anyway, pretty good show. I think I'm on season 1, episode 7, so I'm just barely into it, but I never have really binge watched some sort of series or episodes. Just don't have time.
Yeah, I started Swamp Kings, and as soon as I saw that Urban Meyer was on it and agreed to talk about the team and the program, I figured there wasn't going to be a whole lot onto the dark side and the rogue element to the program. So I haven't finished it. I started it, but kind of like you, I was like, it's fine, but I'm not that intrigued by what they're presenting. So no surprise there. All right, well, let's close it out, Ryan. Again, we appreciate your time today on the show, and thanks for listening. These retirement truths are important, right? You want to customize your plan, but you want to make sure these things are identified and accounted for. Again, you can follow up with Ryan. Black Oak Asset Management can be found online at blackoakam.com or over the phone, 470-508-0508. All right, Ryan, have a good week. We'll catch up again in a couple weeks.
Go Braves.
The Perfect Game Retirement Podcast is brought to you by Black Oak Asset Management, serving the greater Atlanta area with offices in Alpharetta and Macon. The show is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the show on your favorite app today and never miss an episode. Just search for Perfect Game Retirement to find us. You can also visit blackoakam.com to listen to past episodes, to contact Ryan Ledden, and to learn more about how to pitch a perfect game in retirement.
Information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Please consult with a qualified professional before